1. Isolation isn't rejection, it's refinement. God doesn't isolate the weak, He separates the chosen. Loneliness is not punishment, it's preparation. You're not being pushed away, you're being pulled deeper. 2. Being broken is proof you're being built. You thought that crack meant you were done, but God uses the broken to build the unshakable. You've been shattered, yes, but every piece still has purpose. 3. Favor doesn't always feel like a blessing. Being chosen doesn't come with comfort, it comes with weight. That pressure you feel, that's the price of carrying what others can't. 4. The pain is personal, because the purpose is too. Your story hurts because your calling is heavy. You feel alone because your path is unique. Don't curse the pain, it's proof that heaven marked your mission. 1. Isolation isn't rejection, it's refinement. There comes a point in every chosen person's life when they begin to feel the weight of separation, the sting of silence, and the heaviness of loneliness. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being physically alone, but the kind that whispers questions deep into the soul. Why doesn't anyone understand me? Why does it feel like I'm walking this road by myself? Why does it seem like people I thought would be there have vanished? These questions don't come to the ordinary, they come to those who've been called for something extraordinary. That kind of separation, that kind of solitude, isn't punishment, it's not rejection, it's refinement. It's the sacred process of preparation that takes place out of the spotlight so that you're ready to carry what others can't. People often mistake isolation as a negative space, as a void, as something to escape. But what if the quiet place is the only place where clarity is born? What if the silence isn't empty, it's full of instruction? For the chosen, loneliness is often the classroom of destiny. It's where identity is clarified. It's where noise is removed so that truth can speak. It's where distractions are stripped away so that direction becomes clear. And it doesn't feel good. It rarely makes sense. But isolation isn't the absence of purpose, it's the beginning of it. There's a reason a seed grows underground before it ever reaches the light. It's buried before it blossoms. And when it's down there, nobody sees it. It's in the dark, it's under pressure. But it's also where roots are being formed. Strength is being developed. Identity is being defined. The isolation is not a burial, it's a planting. And the same is true for those who are chosen. You feel buried right now, covered in pain, invisible to the world, unsure if anything is ever going to break through. But what you're calling rejection is actually redirection. What you're calling abandonment is actually alignment. Because isolation doesn't mean you're being put away, it means you're being set apart. There are moments in your life when you will outgrow the room you're in, and it's not because you've changed in a negative way, it's because your capacity has expanded. You've been stretched. And sometimes the people who walked with you in the last season can't carry the weight of your next season. It's not personal, it's purposeful. You're not being left behind, and you're not being overlooked. You're being positioned. When you are called to carry something greater, you will be carved out from the crowd. That carving process cuts deep. It leaves scars. But scars don't mean you're weak. They mean you survived what others couldn't. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Alone is a position, lonely is a condition. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely when no one understands the burden you carry, the weight you feel, the calling you're responding to. The chosen often carry vision in silence, because trying to explain what's inside of you to people who've never seen that kind of depth will only frustrate you. You're not crazy for feeling misunderstood. You're not broken for needing space. You're chosen, and the cost of that calling is clarity through solitude. The people around you might be comfortable where they are. They might be content staying average. But something in you is different. You can't settle. You can't sit still. You can't ignore the pull in your spirit. That's the evidence that you've been marked for more. And when you're marked, you won't always be celebrated. Often you'll be separated. That's part of the process. The pruning always comes before the growth. And pruning doesn't feel like a gift, it feels like a loss. But anything that's being cut away is making room for something stronger to grow. Sometimes the only way to rise is to be removed. Removed from the environments that coddle your comfort. Removed from the relationships that drain your focus. Removed from the spaces that shrink your vision. And yes, it will feel like rejection. It will feel like doors closing. It will feel like friends turning. But what if it's not a curse? What if it's the confirmation that you're no longer called to fit in because you were created to stand out? Greatness has always been shaped in isolation. The world claps for results, but results are born in the quiet places. They're born when no one's looking, when you're questioning everything, when you feel like quitting. That's where resilience is formed, not on the stage, but in the shadows. And if you've been crying in the dark, wrestling with identity, battling doubt, wondering if you're even moving forward, then that means you're being shaped into someone who can carry greatness with character. Because elevation without preparation leads to collapse. You don't want the spotlight if your soul isn't steady. And sometimes the only way to steady your soul is through solitude. The isolation is not the enemy, it's the incubator. It's where faith is forged, where habits are hardened, where courage is cultivated. It's in the dark where you learn who you really are, without applause, without affirmation, without an audience. You won't always be understood. That's the tax on vision. When you're chosen, people won't always agree with your decisions. They won't always see your process, and that's okay. Because purpose doesn't need permission. If you live for the approval of others, you will die by their rejection. The isolation is teaching you to walk without needing to be carried, to move without needing to be validated, to believe without needing to be seen. There will be nights when you question why you were picked at all. You'll look at others succeeding, surrounded, supported, and you'll wonder why your road feels so lonely. But understand this, the depth of your calling determines the depth of your cutting. Some are anointed to influence rooms. Others are anointed to shift generations. The deeper the foundation, the higher the building. And the foundation is built in isolation. You can't carry weight without being strengthened first. And strength comes from struggle, from being pressed, stretched, silenced, broken. But you're still here. And every moment of loneliness, every tear you cried, every unanswered question that wasn't a delay, it was design. The designer doesn't start with decoration, he starts with foundation. And the foundation isn't pretty, it's gritty, it's hard, it's quiet, but it's what everything else stands on. Don't mistake separation for rejection. You've been separated to be sharpened. You've been pulled back so you can be launched further. And yes, the isolation is uncomfortable, but comfort never produced greatness. Growth lives in the uncomfortable. Destiny demands discomfort. If you want to be used greatly, you have to be willing to be refined deeply. Refinement is a process of pressure. It's a process of heat. Gold doesn't shine until it's been melted. Diamonds don't sparkle until they've been crushed. Steel isn't strong until it's been forged in fire. So what makes you think you're any different? That season you're in, it's not your end. It's your forge. The pressure is preparing you for a platform. The silence is training you to speak with power. The solitude is filling you with strength that doesn't depend on circumstance. People may walk away. Let them. Doors may close. Let them. Plans may fall apart. Let them. Because what's meant for you doesn't need to beg to stay. You weren't created to be, you were created to build, to rise, to lead. And you can't lead where you haven't been willing to go alone. Leadership starts in loneliness. It begins in the quiet place where most people quit. But you're not most people, you're chosen. And that calling will require seasons where no one claps, no one checks in, no one understands. That's the test. But after the test comes the transformation. You don't leave the fire the same. You come out refined, sharper, wiser, stronger, cleaner. That's what isolation does. It doesn't destroy, it distills. It removes the noise so you can hear the necessity. It breaks your dependence on others so you can develop confidence in what's already inside of you. What you thought was rejection was actually a rescue. You were rescued from average, rescued from compromise, rescued from distraction, and now you're being refined. Every lonely night, every painful silence, every unanswered prayer, it's part of the process. Not to break you, but to build you. You've been walking alone because you're being taught to walk tall, to walk ready, to walk focused. And when the time comes, the same people who left you alone will be the ones asking how you made it. And the answer won't be what you had. It'll be what you learned in the silence, in the solitude, in the fire, in the forge. 2. Being broken is proof you're being built. There's a misconception in the world that brokenness is the end of the story, that when something is fractured, it's finished, that when someone is shattered, they're no longer useful. But that's a lie. The truth is, being broken is not the end, it's the evidence that something stronger is being built. The cracks in your story aren't signs of failure, they're signs of foundation. Because chosen people don't break to be discarded, they break to be rebuilt differently, with more depth, more strength, more clarity. It's easy to assume that brokenness is a disqualifier, that because the past is heavy, because the pain was deep, because the scars still sting, you're not worthy of anything great. But what if those very wounds are the prerequisites for your calling? What if what hurt you was the hammer shaping your destiny? You don't get wisdom without the wounds. You don't get power without the pressure. The strongest people you'll ever meet didn't avoid the break, they survived it. And in surviving it, they discovered a new version of themselves. a version that can't be bought, a version that can't be shaken, a version that doesn't rely on surface-level approval because they've been to the bottom and learned how to breathe underwater. You were broken so you could be reassembled with divine precision. You were shattered because the old you couldn't carry what's coming. The break wasn't random, it was surgical, it was strategic. Because sometimes the only way to fix what's fractured internally is to break what's comfortable externally. And that hurts. No one asks to be broken. No one prays for the pain. But sometimes pain becomes the doorway to power. Because when the surface cracks, the deeper layers get exposed, and that's where the real transformation begins. There's beauty in brokenness when you understand the purpose behind it. A broken bone, when healed, becomes stronger at the point of the break. Let that sink in. The very place where you fractured is where your strength will live. The heartbreak, that will become the heart you use to heal others. The betrayal, that will become the discernment that keeps you sharp. The depression, that will become the empathy that lifts someone else out of their darkness. You're not just breaking, you're becoming. And the brokenness isn't a sign you're losing, it's the confirmation that you're in the middle of your making. It's easy to romanticize strength and forget the suffering it took to get there. But there's no strength without struggle, no breakthrough without breaking, no resilience without rejection. And if you've been walking through a season where it feels like everything is falling apart, understand that sometimes it has to fall apart to fall into place. The chosen are often called into chaos before they ever find clarity. You're not cursed, you're being carved. You're not forgotten, you're being formed. Don't let the break make you bitter. Let it make you better. Bitterness freezes the process. It keeps you stuck in the memory instead of moving into the miracle. You have to release the need for answers and embrace the assignment, because sometimes the answers don't come right away. Sometimes all you have is confusion and a cracked mirror. But the longer you sit in the presence of purpose, the clearer the reflection becomes. You start to realize that what felt like destruction was actually deconstruction, and something new is being built in its place. The break makes you honest. It removes the mask. It reveals the motives. And that's necessary, because when you're chosen, you don't get to walk through life pretending. You don't get to be shallow. You've been called to go deep, to feel deep, to love deep. And that depth comes at a cost. The cost is vulnerability. It's failure. It's disappointment. But on the other side of that is an unshakable authenticity, a rootedness that can't be faked. People will often look at you and only see the surface of your story. They'll see the confidence, the accomplishments, the gifts, but they won't see the journey. They won't see the nights you cried yourself to sleep. They won't see the moments when you almost gave up. They won't see the thoughts that tried to convince you that you weren't enough, but you know. And the fact that you're still standing is proof that what tried to break you didn't succeed. It shaped you, but it didn't stop you. It cracked you, but it didn't crush you. You're still here, and that matters. Because the enemy of your purpose doesn't attack what isn't powerful. The break proves you're carrying something valuable. Thieves don't rob empty houses. That pressure you've been under that was targeting potential. That pain you walked through that was a compliment in disguise. It said you're someone the darkness was afraid of. You're someone who could change the game. Someone who could shift the atmosphere. Someone who could inspire others, not because life was easy, but because you endured when it wasn't. And now you're being built. Not just put back together, but rebuilt stronger, wiser, more aware. Because when you've been broken, you don't take peace for granted. You don't take clarity lightly. You don't waste time with surface-level distractions. You learn how to treasure what matters. You learn how to move with intention. You become dangerous in the best way because now you know what real pain feels like, and you still chose to rise. The world doesn't need more polished personas. It needs real people. People who've walked through fire and came out not with a perfect image, but with a powerful story. People who've embraced their brokenness as part of their testimony, not a blemish to hide. When you stop hiding your pain, it becomes your platform. When you stop running from your past, it becomes your foundation. Every piece of your broken story still has purpose. Don't rush the rebuild. Don't force the process. Sometimes healing takes longer than you expected. Sometimes things fall apart slower than they broke. That's okay. You're not behind. You're not late. You're healing on heaven's clock, not the world's timeline. And in that healing, you're discovering strength you didn't know you had, grace you didn't know was possible, faith you didn't know could stretch that far. Being broken has a way of humbling you, softening you, stripping away all the fluff. You start to recognize that your identity isn't in what you've done, it's in who you're becoming. You stop needing to impress people, and you start desiring to impact people. That shift, that's the work of the break. That's the gift inside the grief. That's the treasure inside the trauma. The very thing you thought would destroy you is the thing that will define the rest of your life if you let it. There's power in embracing your brokenness. Not to stay in it, not to glorify the pain, but to testify through it. To say, I went through that, but it didn't take me out. I lost some things, but I didn't lose myself. I cracked under the weight, but I didn't collapse completely. And now, I rise different. I rise deeper. I rise better. When you begin to see your breaking not as a verdict, but as a vehicle, you reclaim your voice. You take your power back. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable, and you start showing up in the fullness of who you are. Even if you're still healing, even if you're still figuring it out. Because being broken isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. And the world is waiting on your realness. You're not here to wear a mask of strength. You're here to walk in real strength, the kind that comes from knowing the pain, but choosing the path anyway. The kind that comes from being broken and still believing, still trusting, still moving. That's power. That's what sets the chosen apart. So if you're in a season where everything feels fragile, where your emotions are raw, where your faith is tested, know that something holy is happening beneath the surface. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. You're not being left behind. You're being lifted up on painful, powerful layer at a time. 3. Loneliness is the language of leaders. There's something sacred about solitude, something that most people misunderstand until they've lived through it. Loneliness isn't just the absence of people. It's the presence of purpose, growing in silence. It's a space where distractions fall away, masks come off, and what's left is you and the weight of the call you carry. It's not punishment, it's preparation. Because when you're chosen, you will go through seasons where no one gets you, no one calls you, and no one stands with you. Not because you're unworthy, but because the next level requires a version of you that can't be built in crowds. The higher the calling, the deeper the cutting. And when you're chosen, loneliness becomes your training ground. It's not glamorous. It's not easy. It's not something you'd post on social media. But it's in that isolation that you start to see who you really are when there's no one left to impress. The applause fades. The opinions disappear. And in the silence, you face the only voice that truly matters, your own. That's the beginning of leadership. That's the soil where greatness grows. Not in comfort, not in popularity, but in the wilderness of isolation. Some of the strongest leaders you'll ever meet didn't rise because they were surrounded. They rose because they endured the silence. They didn't become who they are by blending in. They stood alone when it cost them everything. There's a price to purpose, and one of the first payments is loneliness. You don't get vision and community at the same time. Vision comes first. Then, as you move forward, the right people catch up. But most won't. And that's not rejection, that's revelation. The calling will always separate before it elevates. It will draw lines in places you didn't expect. Friendships will fade, relationships will shift, and you'll be tempted to think something is wrong with you. But what's really happening is alignment. You're being realigned with your identity, and that means certain attachments have to be removed. You can't carry old weights into a new dimension. The loneliness is not your enemy. It's your emancipation from who you used to be. Because the version of you that's needed for what's next cannot be crowded by the past. It's in the lonely seasons that your convictions get tested. Not in the spotlight, not in the crowd, but in the shadows. When no one is clapping, when no one is encouraging you, when no one sees you. That's when leadership is formed. That's when your motives are purified. Because you find out quickly whether you were doing it for theme or for something greater. If your identity was built on attention, then the absence of it will crush you. But if it's built on assignment, then even in isolation, you'll rise. The chosen walk roads that few understand, not because they're better, but because they're burdened. Burdened with vision, with insight, with sensitivity to what others ignore. And that burden will often make you feel like a misfit, like you don't belong in the room, like your voice is too deep, too raw, too different. But that difference is your distinction. That sense of not fitting in is actually proof that you've outgrown the place you're in. The discomfort is a signal, not a setback. Stop trying to shrink to fit places your purpose has outgrown. Stop watering down your wisdom just to feel welcome. The loneliness you're feeling isn't because you're off track, it's because you're on mission. And missions require focus. Focus requires separation. Separation creates silence. And in that silence, leadership is born. Not leadership defined by titles or popularity, but leadership defined by truth, by courage, by authenticity. True leaders are forged in fire. Not just the fire of public pressure, but the fire of private pain. The late nights wondering if you're enough. The silent battles that no one will ever see. The hard choices that cost you friendships. The principles you refuse to compromise on, even if it means walking alone. That's leadership, and it's lonely. But loneliness is not weakness, it's witness. It's the proof that you're carrying something sacred. And not everyone can walk with you when you're carrying something sacred. Don't be surprised when you start to feel the distance growing between you and the crowd. That's not arrogance, it's ascension. When you rise in identity, you lose access to certain levels of comfort. That doesn't make you superior, it makes you selected. And selection requires separation. There's a reason you can't hang with everyone anymore. A reason you can't say yes to every invitation. A reason your spirit feels heavy in places you used to feel at home. That's purpose pushing you. That's destiny stretching you. Because leaders don't lead from the middle of the crowd, they lead from out front. And out front is lonely, it's vulnerable, it's exposed, but it's necessary. If you always need to be surrounded to feel strong, you'll never have the courage to take the steps no one else is willing to take. Leaders walk first, they believe first, they endure first. And that means seasons where you're misunderstood, criticized, even mocked, but you keep walking, you keep trusting, you keep moving. Because your calling isn't dependent on consensus, it's dependent on conviction. Sometimes the loneliness is God's way of making sure you hear clearly. The noise of opinions, the weight of expectations can all drown out the whisper of wisdom, so you're pulled away. Not as punishment, but as protection. Because if you heard every voice but didn't hear the one voice that matters, you'd miss the whole reason you were chosen in the first place. Leadership demands clarity, and clarity comes in quiet places. If you've been feeling isolated, understand this. Solitude is sacred space. It's where your mind is sharpened, your heart is tested, and your spirit is strengthened. It's where you face the ugly parts of yourself and deal with them honestly. It's where you outgrow the insecurities you've been hiding behind. And it's where you reconnect with your real identity, not the one shaped by other people's projections, but the one that was formed in you before you were ever misunderstood, rejected, or applauded. It hurts to feel like no one gets you. It's painful to show up in spaces and feel unseen. But leadership isn't about being seen, it's about seeing. Seeing what others don't, seeing ahead, seeing deeper. And in that seeing, you have to walk roads that others won't walk until your obedience builds the path for them to follow. There's no shortcut to this process. You can't network your way into it. You can't charm your way through it. This kind of loneliness is something every true leader faces, not because they're failing, but because they're forming. And formation happens away from the crowds. Jesus went to the wilderness before he walked into the city. David was shaped in fields long before he held a crown. And you're being shaped in your silence, refined in your waiting, forged in your loneliness. You won't always feel this way. But for now, let it work on you. Let it break the need to be liked. Let it stretch your ability to believe in yourself. Let it expose the places where you've been codependent on the presence of others to feel powerful. Loneliness is your lab. It's where your leadership DNA gets developed. When the noise fades, the truth speaks louder. And the truth is, you're more than enough without the crowd. You're powerful without validation. You're qualified without popularity. What's in you is not fragile. It doesn't need constant applause to survive. It needs quiet. It needs space. It needs fire. That's what loneliness gives you. You are not abandoned. You're being aligned. Not forgotten, but focused. Not cast out, but carved out. Because where you're going, you can't afford to carry the baggage of codependency. You have to know how to stand alone, how to believe alone, how to fight alone. Because when you finally arrive at your moment, you'll lead from authenticity, not approval. The world doesn't need more popular voices. It needs more powerful ones. Voices shaped by silence. Voices tested by time. Voices that didn't sell their soul for acceptance. That's the kind of leader you're becoming. And loneliness is part of the curriculum. You didn't lose people, you gained clarity. You didn't get left behind, you were sent ahead. And one day, the very ones who didn't understand your isolation will be impacted by what it produced. But for now, lean into the quiet, embrace the space, and let the loneliness do what only it can do, make you the leader you were always meant to be.